The House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. Chair would ask all members and guests in the galleries to please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the gentleman, the 60th Delegate Wilson.
Great, good, gracious God, forgive us the hubris that corrupts and impedes our service. Humble us to serve the principles and the people whom we represent. Strengthen and encourage us to stand firm on our convictions, to employ all of our will and skill to execute the task assigned us, and to engage respectfully and civilly with each other. Make us valiant, make us humble, make us strong, make us wise. I ask this in the name of your Son, my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All members and guests will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning by the gentleman, the 28th Delegate Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please join me in saying the pledge to the country and to the flag that so many have gave their ultimate sacrifice for. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Tuesday, January 14th, 2020.
Gentleman, the 47th, Delegate Phillips.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman, the 48th, asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Further reading of the journal will be dispensed with. Introduction of guests. Introduction of guests. The gentleman, the 44th, Delegate Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, well, on behalf of myself and the gentleman from the 41st, today we have some pages with us from Nicholas County High School. If they please stand when I call their name. We have Talinda Ferguson, Adrian Bounds, and Michaela Garcia. And also, Jenna Cooper was supposed to be here today, but she fell ill this morning. So if you could please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman, the 10th, Delegate Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today from Wood County, the president of West Virginia University at Parkersburg, Dr. Chris Gilmer, is with us today in the gallery. Also with him is Dr. Tori Jackson, who is Vice President of Instructional Advancement and the CEO of the WVUP Foundation. If they'd stand, please, and the body make them feel welcome. Also in the gallery from Wood County, we have Mark Lewis, who's the president of the Wood County CVB. Mark, please stand and please make them feel welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 8th, Delegate Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to the body former Delegate Mark Sateslow. He has joined us in the chamber today. Would the body make him welcome?
The gentleman, the 41st, Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Up in the gallery here, we have Ernie Jarvis, who is chaperoning our pages today from NCHS. He is the assistant principal at the high school there. If he would please stand, the House, please make him feel welcome.
The gentleman, the 6th, Delegate Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery today are two very close friends from Doddridge County, District 6. Would you make Chris Bonnell and Laura Lee Modisett feel welcome, please?
The gentleman, the 18th, Delegate Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the North Gallery, we have the mayor of Barboursville, the only municipal in my district, Mayor Tatum, and it happens to be his birthday as well. So if everyone would give him a round of applause and welcome him. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Porterfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning we have the president of Concord College, Ms. Kendra Bogus, and her assistant in the West Gallery. Would the House please make them feel welcome? Thank you.
The gentleman from the 35th, Douglas Scaff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my distinct honor in the South Gallery to recognize, on behalf of all of us, the state president of AARP, Ms. Jane Marks. Please stand and be recognized.
The gentleman from the 19th, Doug Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Robbie Thompson and myself, I'd like to introduce 5 pages from Wayne County. These pages are Caden Lovejoy, Emily Smith, Brandon Day, Isaac Maynard, Lucy Ward, and Lance Ramey. And I'd also like to acknowledge the attendance of 2 special people from Wayne County, a former Buffalo High School coach, graduate, and Spring Valley High School baseball coach and his assistant. That is James Hensley and Steve Fouch. Would you stand up, please? Pages, please stand.
The gentleman from the 19th, Doug Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and Delegate Hicks, we have several of my students from Wayne High School as pages today. They are Cole Kiley, Chase Jackson, Brandon Lusk, and Kelton Creed. If they would please stand so they can, and please give them a round of applause. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 50th, Doug Angelucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe she's in the balcony. I think she's outside the chamber, but I'd like to welcome Leisha Elliott on behalf of Delegates Caputo and Longstreth here to the Capitol today in honor and tourism. She's the director of the Marion County Chamber Convention and Visitors Bureau. And also in the South Gallery, I'd like to personally welcome Margaret Pamponio and Julie Warden to the Capitol. Thank you all for coming here today.
The gentleman from the 44th, Doug Hannah.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. For Tourism Day, we also have here from Upshur County in the West Gallery, Laura Meadows. If she would please stand and the House would make her feel welcome.
Are there further introductions? If not, report to standing committees.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration House Bill 4062, reducing the cost of prescription drugs, and House Bill 4108, relating generally to certificates of need for health care services. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration House Bill 4009 relating to the process for involuntary hospitalization, House Bill 4061 Health Benefit Plan Network Access and Adequacy Act, and House Bill 4094 continuing the Foster Care Ombudsman. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that they each do pass, that they be reported to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report will be received. Each bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Energy has had under consideration House Bill 4090 creating the Oil and Gas Abandoned Well Plugging Fund. Reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
The report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Energy has had under consideration House Bill 4091, allowing for expedited oil and gas well permitting upon payment of applicable expedited fees. Reports back a committee substitute with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2142, issuing identification documents to homeless individuals residing at homeless shelters, House Bill 2471, increasing criminal penalties for impersonation of law enforcement officers or officials, and House Bill 3134, establishing criminal penalties for negligent homicide and increasing criminal penalties for reckless driving. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that they each do pass as amended, that they be referred to Committee on Finance.
The report will be received. Pursuant to the provisions of House Rule 80, each bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 4096, requiring candidates to live in the state or local election district for the office for which they are seeking. Reports back to committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that a committee substitute to pass.
The report will be received. Are there further reports to standing committees? If not, reports of select committees, messages from the executive, message from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announces the adoption by the Senate of Senate Concurrent Resolution 1, designating dogs adopted from animal shelters and rescues as West Virginia official state dog.
The message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committees on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Rules. Are there further messages from the Senate? If not, resolutions.
House Resolution 5, urging support of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement.
Lady in the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system.
The lady in the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Petitions, motions, bills introduced.
House Bill 4349, exempting sales of small arms and small arms ammunition from state sales and use taxes.
Lady in the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system.
The lady in the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Unfinished business, bills on third reading.
House Bill 3039, relating to a court's consideration of the expression of a preference by a child in certain child custody matters.
Is there objection to the gentleman from the 27th explaining the bill in lieu of having it read? Chair hears no objections. Gentleman from the 27th, Doug Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. House Bill 3039, relatively simple. Would that all the bills that I have to explain be this simple. Simply what we're doing in this case is removing the arbitrary specification of an age in a domestic relation bill and expanding the discretion of the family court. Here's the way it works currently. If the parties to a domestic dispute cannot agree on an allocation of custodial responsibility, then the court, one of the factors that the court considers is what's called the firm and reasonable preference of a child who's 14 years of age. All this bill does is remove that arbitrary selection of the age of 14 and allow the judge's discretion as to whether the child is sufficiently mature to make a recommendation or a choice of parental division of custody. Currently, the judge has to take into account the 14-year-old's preference, but can take into account the preference of a child under 14 if the judge determined that that child is sufficiently mature. All this does is remove that age 14 and simply says the judge uses his discretion in any case in judging the child's maturity in making that selection. Also, there's a second part of the code that's modified, and that deals with the parenting plan. From time to time, the parties may go before the court to seek a modification of the terms of that plan. If they can't agree on that, once again, the same language is in the bill or is in the current code that the judge should consider the firm and reasonable preference of the child who's 14 years of age or older. And oftentimes that means the parent has to wait until the child reaches the age of 14 to file for a modification. Once again, what this bill does is simply remove the age of 14, the arbitrary selection of that age, and allow the judge to exercise his or her discretion in any case in which there's a request for a modification of a parenting plan and the child wishes to express his or her preference in that context. That's all the bill does, simply removes the arbitrary selection of that age and vests additional discretion in the court. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 87 ayes, 11 nays, 2 members absent not voting. More than a majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3039.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the acts to the House or the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004, creating the West Virginia Sentencing Commission.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Chair hears no objections. Gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Among the many challenges of facing our state, the reform of our criminal justice system is one of the least publicized. To keep this in context, we have a criminal justice system in which we are anywhere from 20 to 25% over capacity in our prisons. Our regional jails are overflowing, not only with those that are there for pretrial detention, but also those who have already been sentenced to the penitentiary, but the penitentiaries are over capacity and can't retain those. Obviously, everyone here is aware of the crisis in the regional jail bill among most, if not all, of our counties. This is one component. This bill attempts to address one component of our criminal justice reform. It's not the only piece in this puzzle, but it is an important piece of this puzzle. What we're doing here is creating the West Virginia Sentencing Commission as a standing committee of the Governor's Committee on Crime, Delinquency, and Correction. The purpose, basically, of this commission, as I said, it's a standing committee, so it's not limited to time frame. It can operate over time. It's to promote a fuller understanding of our criminal justice sentencing system, including the sentencing length served, parole eligibility, revocation, determinate and indeterminate sentences, incarceration alternatives, and their respective roles in demand for prison space. Among the objectives is to promote reduce sentence disparity, preserve judicial discretion and flexibility, and ensure appropriate criminal penalties with options for appropriate nonviolent offenders. The Commission will be vested with a number of powers and duties, including the ability to request and require data and information, consider witnesses and evidence, establish as a clearinghouse for information, consult with the courts and the related entities for sound sentencing practices, collect and publish relevant data, make recommendations to the Legislature, disseminate information regarding incapacitation, recidivism, deterrence, and sentencing effectiveness, make recommendations and study national trends to overcome addiction and criminal behavior, review of bail and pretrial risk assessment, and also standardized pretrial risk assessment or bail schedule if the West Virginia Supreme Court does not adopt its own system by January of next year. It authorizes the Commission to use funding and grants with staffing supported by the Division of Administrative Services of DMAPS, and includes in its membership members representing DMAPS, the Division of Military Affairs and Public Safety, the West Virginia Prosecuting Attorneys Association, the West Virginia Chief of Police Association, the West Virginia Sheriff's Association, the West Virginia Judicial Association, the West Virginia Association of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse Counselors, the Legislature, both the House and the Senate, and the Dean of the West Virginia College of Law. By the way, this bill has passed in substantially this form in 2 preceding sessions by this House. Unfortunately, it's not been taken up in the Senate, so when we pass it, I would certainly urge you to urge your Senate colleagues to consider it and pass some version of it that we can all agree would work toward resolving some of our issues in the criminal justice system. Mr. Speaker, that's a summary of the bill. I urge its passage.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 97 ayes, 1 nay, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4007, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Is there objection to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Chair hears no objection. Gentleman from the 41st, Douglas Hill, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to require a physician, if a child is born alive during the performance of an abortion, to exercise the same medical judgment he or she would use to preserve the child's life as they would to any other child born alive at the same gestational age. Children receiving care would immediately have to be transported to a hospital to receive treatment, and those failing to comply with these requirements is subject to discipline by the applicable licensing board. Violations may result in loss of professional license to practice in one's field. Those who violate the requirements of this bill and do not possess a physician's or other medical license are also subject to penalty. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 67th, Douglas Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pro-choice. I have served in this chamber this is my 24th year, and I have a spotless pro-choice record. This bill presents an interesting dilemma, I think, for all of us. This bill does absolutely nothing. It proposes to make illegal something that is already illegal. A friend of mine, I haven't seen him in a number of years, his name is Leon Copeland. He served in this House back in the late 70s. And Delegate Copeland came up with what he called the Copeland Rule to apply to a bill. That is a bill that does absolutely nothing for anyone and absolutely nothing to anyone. The Copeland Rule applies to this bill. So I think it makes absolutely no difference how I vote or how anyone else votes on this bill. It shouldn't be here because it does nothing.
The gentleman from the 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to tell you what this bill does do. When you have a live baby that was just born, regardless of what the intent was moments prior, but when you have that live baby laying on the table, what you don't do is have a doctor say, well, we'll just have a discussion with the mother and see what to do. That's what you don't do. You help that child. You work with that child. You give that child medical care, just like if it were myself, you, your daughter, your son laying on that table. You give that child, that person, due medical care. That's what this bill does. It is important. It does a great deal, and I urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking at the title of this bill, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, and that's some pretty graphic language. It's pretty divisive language. It's got the word abortion in there that tends to divide us in this chamber. It's got the phrase born alive. I think each of us sitting here probably has a different, very graphic image of what that could mean. But where did this bill come from? And was it written by West Virginians to solve a West Virginia problem? You know, as many of you know, similar bills have passed elsewhere. North Carolina passed a bill called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Montana passed a bill called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. And in Wisconsin, they passed a bill called Requirements for Children Born Alive Following Abortion or Attempted Abortion. And these bills grab headlines. They make for good attack ads. But do they actually do anything? And what happened to those three bills, the bills in North Carolina and Wisconsin and Montana? They were all vetoed. And here are a few sentences from those veto messages. In North Carolina, the governor said, laws already protect newborn babies. And the veto message continued, this needless legislation would criminalize doctors and other healthcare providers for a practice that simply does not exist. And the governor's veto message in Wisconsin said, this bill is redundant because the protections this bill seeks to provide already exist in state law. And what about Montana? The veto message said, the situation this bill purportedly seeks to address is a medical practice that does not exist. And it continued, I believe women, families, and healthcare providers are best able to make these difficult medical decisions without political interference that is meant only to inflame and cause division. That's what these veto messages said. So make no mistake, there are laws in place already at the state level and in the federal level. The chair of the WVU School of Medicine's Department of OBGYN said about this bill, the chance of this truly affecting any West Virginian is extremely small. Any West Virginian. Doctors are in practice to help people, to save people. My dad was a doctor. My dad was an OBGYN doctor. He delivered a lot of babies. He provided a wide range of women's health care services. And he cared about mothers, he cared about babies. That's why he was a doctor. And we've talked about some of those difficult decisions that he's made with his patients and with their families. And a lot of these are life and death decisions that we can't even imagine. These are decisions that doctors make every day with their patients, not just in women's health care, but in other types of health care. And I'm thankful for the doctors that understand the science and the art of practicing medicine, and they're compassionate, caring people that want to help people. And I think it's wrong for us to run a bill that might criminalize doctors like my dad, even if the bill really doesn't do much of anything. So I wonder why we're voting on this bill today. Why are we voting on this 1 week in the session when the candidate filing period just opened? Is this really the number one priority for West Virginians? Yesterday, I attended the Hunger Caucus meeting. People from both parties were there. And we learned that 1 in 5 kids in West Virginia, kids that were actually born alive, are hungry. But we're not addressing that in the first week of the session. And we know that we have 7,000 kids across the state of West Virginia that were actually born alive that are in need of foster care, and we're not addressing that in the first week of the session. Those are real crises that we should be voting on. My constituents sent me to Charleston to solve real problems and not to vote for a bill that does nothing but divide us. So I'm not playing this political game. I'm going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 60th, Douglas Wilson.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we just heard that the law already protects newborns. The Second Amendment already protects your right to keep and bear arms. And yet we see laws all over the country that abrogate that right, in spite of the fact that the Constitution of the United States protects that right. So our laws already protect newborns. Are we to assume that there will be no further laws that abrogate that right, the newborn's right to life? The Declaration of Independence states that the U.S., the United States of America, was formed to protect the rights of each citizen to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the reason this entire country exists. Why the government of the United States of America was formed was to protect your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of every human being who is a citizen of this country. And yet, those rights are abrogated on a daily basis. So, yeah, there might be laws that protect the rights of newborns to life. That might change tomorrow. Our number one priority, why this is being looked at right now? Well, I tell you what, my number one priority for being here is protect everyone's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In fact, I'm convinced the only reason any government, the only valid reason any government has for existing, is to uphold and defend the individual natural rights of each individual citizen, all of their natural rights, beginning with the right to life. Yeah, it's the number one priority. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 53rd, Delegate Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, I'm a paramedic, and I had the opportunity one time to deliver a 20-week-old. And when this, it was in the back of a truck, and we did pull over to the side of the road. And when this baby came out, it weighed less than 1.5 pounds, fits in your hand. You can see through its arms. And it wasn't breathing, so I started CPR. You know how you do CPR on a baby? You put it between your fingers like this, and you take both thumbs. That's how small they are. And you get their blood flowing. When you got it up to a point, it started breathing on its own. And then when we get to the hospital, you cannulate that baby by cannulating the umbilicus. And that's where you stick a cannulation so you can give it IVs in the umbilicus. You intubate it so it doesn't have to struggle to breathe. And if we are saying this little fella, remember I said we stuck the cannulus in its navel, and I was doing breathing for it. It reached up with its foot and grabbed the hold of that cannulation, pulled it out. And when it did, you know, of course we had to put it back in, but we was laughing about it. This is a 20-week-old. And if you can say that let's put this up on a steel platter and just let that baby quit breathing because we don't think it was an attempted abortion, I think that's wrong. Do you realize we've got laws that we're going to try to pass here that if we would kill a cat or a dog, could be a felony? And we're going to lay a baby up on a steel platter and say that's okay. You need to think about that when you go to vote on this bill. Thank you.
The lady from 51st, Dr. Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about the context of this bill. And the gentleman from the 51st from Montague County spoke a little bit about how there is legislation around the country that is bringing this up in legislature after legislature. And in this legislature, year after year, outside special interests have insisted that we vote on at least one abortion bill every single year. And that has happened certainly for the last 5 years. This vehicle, House Bill 4007, presents us with an imaginary problem and an imaginary solution. We heard from our physician on the health committee that it is physiologically impossible for a fetus to survive outside the womb at or under 20 weeks. There's an article today from the head of WVU OBGYN who says it's the chance of that happening is about like being struck by lightning, of the baby being struck by lightning. We have no incidents whether this has ever happened in West Virginia, nor have we heard of any evidence about any surrounding states or any other states in the country. The solution, it's not a solution to anything because it's been illegal for decades. There was a 2002 Congress passed a Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, and it's also illegal under state law. So, and as the gentleman said, the physicians and Physician Medical Association have said this bill will have no practical effect. So it's an imaginary solution to an imaginary problem. Well, why are we dealing with this then? Why are we taking up precious time of this 60-day session? And for that matter, why do we do it year after year? And that, I believe, is because it's a political game, G-A-M-E. The hope is that some Democrats who feel strongly about women's bodily integrity and the right to make decisions about their body can be marginalized and demonized. We'll have flyers, we'll have radio ads against them, and maybe we can pick some of them off. That is what I believe is the game that's being played here. If I'm right that this is a game, it's a cynical game, and it's purely political. Women's right to decide whether or not to have children is not a game to me. It is serious business. I'm not going to participate in this game, and I will be voting no.
The gentleman to 62nd, Doug Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have any prepared remarks, but I'm going to speak from the heart. The opponents of this bill would have you believe that we don't need this law in West Virginia. No, we need this law in West Virginia. We need to send a strong signal to the rest of the country. In New York State, babies can be left to die that are born alive. We have a governor that signed that into law. We have a governor in Virginia, not more than 10 miles from where I live, that's willing to sign a law into West Virginia and agrees that babies that are born alive can be left to die. My wife spent over 30 years as a labor and delivery nurse. My daughter does ultrasounds on young babies that are in the womb. Neither of them have ever participated in an abortion. My wife refused to participate in any abortion that would be done when she was in Northern Virginia. We have to show the rest of the world that we, in West Virginia, we are pro-life. We want to stand for pro-life. My God, if we're not willing to stand up for the life of a young baby that's born alive, I don't know what we're talking about. We've got to have the courage to at least send a signal to the rest of the United States, the rest of the states, that in West Virginia we will support life at all gestational periods. And if we can have newborns. My wife was a labor and delivery nurse, delivered many babies that were well premature, and to say that child's life can be just left on a table and left to die because it wasn't meant to be born. It was a mistake because the abortion somehow went wrong. We can't think like that. We've got to protect life. We do protect life in West Virginia. I think by passing this bill, we'll also prevent a governor down the road from coming along and deciding that it's not worth saving this life, and we'll pass a law. They'll pass a law like they did in New York. They'll pass a law like they did, or they'll do what they'll do in Virginia. So we've got to. I urge everyone in this body to choose life on this one and vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from 65th, Doug Brown.
Speaker, would the chairman of Health please yield?
Does Chairman yield for a question? Yes, Chairman does yield.
Thank you so much. In your words, could you describe the end result of this bill? What are you looking to accomplish with this particular piece of legislation?
To ensure, as the delegate just said, that we do send a signal across the country, first of all. Secondly, that we do ensure that abortion doctors are fully aware that the people, the citizens of this state and their representatives are not willing to stand back and do nothing if this does occur in the future. I do believe that every child, whether if they are born alive through a botched abortion, they deserve life. They deserve the same care that any other child in any other situation that they deserve.
And in the drafting of this particular bill, what stakeholders were present?
I am not the lead sponsor of this, so I do not know what stakeholders were involved.
Mr. Speaker, when the time is right, I'd like to ask questions of the lead sponsor, but I'd like to continue with the Chairman of Health. So then you're telling me that because you're not aware of what stakeholders were present, you aren't sure if there were any OBGYNs present to be a part of the transcript or even part of the inception of this particular bill?
I do not know who was involved during this. No.
All right. Did you not ask that during committee?
Nobody on the committee requested testimony.
All right. And are you aware of current law regarding reproductive rights in the state of West Virginia?
I mean,
do you know what reproductive rights are?
Yes,
okay.
But I mean...
All right. So then 2015, that piece of legislation implemented a 20-week ban. How many abortion providers are in the state of West Virginia, Mr. Chairman?
How many what?
How many abortion providers are in the state of West Virginia currently?
One that I'm aware of.
One with a 16-week self-imposed restriction. Do you know what the size of a fetus is at 16 weeks?
No.
Do you know what anatomy is available at 16 weeks?
No.
At that point, a fetus is only the size of an apple with no viable lungs. If it were to be outside of the womb, it would not be a viable fetus. It could not survive. If we go into the bill, the wording of the bill, you're asking for there not only to be means for this child to be resuscitated, but then also for it to be transported to another location. Is that correct?
If the child is not born alive, that's not what this bill requires.
It can't be born alive. That's the issue. We're saying that outside of the womb at 16 weeks, the fetus is not viable.
Go ahead.
And with that, it is impossible, medically impossible, for a fetus to be resuscitated at that point. Would you agree?
I would say that in the future, some on the side of the aisle have proudly stated that they are very pro-choice. In the future, if you all did take the majority and decided to repeal that law that we passed the 20-week abortion ban, then we would have this issue, and then I think this bill being in place, this law being in place, would remedy that situation.
And then with potential criminal ramifications, at this point we have the patient who I believe at the end of the bill you said that you've exempted. The ramifications for the physician, what are those?
The ramification for the physician?
Yes.
Loss of license.
Okay, and what would be the ramifications for the witnesses that you've also cited in this bill?
I don't see anything in this.
Yes, sir, there's verbiage that says that witnesses that do not report, they are also liable. Let's move on.
If they do not, can I answer?
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
If they do not report, then they would be subject to the disciplinary actions.
What would be the disciplinary actions?
I'm sorry?
What would be the disciplinary actions, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, be suspended, lose their license, just license be revocated.
By witnesses, what would you mean? Do you mean
their medical license?
By witnesses, define witnesses in this scenario.
The only thing the bill contemplates in this is medical professionals.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on from that one as well. Then federal law, as cited from my colleague, 2002, implemented by the Bush administration. This is a national policy that also is referred to as Born Alive. This is also something that was intended to prevent infanticide. Are you familiar with that legislation?
Yes.
And also we passed as a state, there is Amendment 1, so there's already restrictions on abortion access. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then what else are we trying to accomplish with this particular bill?
If you want me to repeat the same thing I said during your first question, the whole point of this is to first send a message across the nation to ensure that everybody knows that this state is not going to stand for something like this, and to ensure we are protecting children who, in this situation, if they are born during a botched abortion, that they are taken care of just as any other child would be cared for in any other situation.
Mr. Chairman, that feels like a political statement to me, as opposed to a medical one, or even one about...
Feel any way you want.
Okay. That being said, questions are done. Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the bill?
Lady wish for someone else to yield or to speak?
I'm going to go ahead and speak to the bill.
Ladies recognized to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, in just this exchange, in just the question and answer, it's very clear to me that the proper stakeholders were not a part of the conversation in order to create a bill that is viable, in order to really speak to how to preserve life in this particular situation. There is legislation that can be introduced. There is policy that can be introduced to protect the mother, to protect the fetus, to protect a child that can be born. And in this case, we already have legal precedent to ban any sort of infanticide in the state of West Virginia and the nation. Further, we have one abortion provider in the state of West Virginia. And as already discussed, it has a self-imposed restriction of 16 weeks. And in that time frame, the fetus is not viable. And so the very scenario that we are trying to litigate here that may have criminal persecution post-haste, I'm telling you, this is not possible. And further, we're now basing legislation. We're trying to push forward law that is not based on fact. And ladies and gentlemen, I need to caution you of this as a legislative body. Are we going to be a body that is complicit to creating law based on political statements, propaganda, mistruths, and medical fallacy? Is that the chamber we are? I would caution you against that. And now I will tell you that I was put here as a representative for the 65th District. I represent the voices of Charlestown and Ranson. I represent the voices of a community that raised me. And with my vote, I would be endorsing a process. I would be endorsing a piece of legislation and a piece of policy. But ladies and gentlemen, we've already showed that this piece of policy is not based on fact. And we should be held to a higher standard because we are stewards of governance to create policy based on truth. And I will not lend the voice of the 65th to things that simply are not true. I'm all for policy that will protect mothers, that will protect infants, that will protect life, but this simply isn't it. It is my charge and yours to protect individuals within your respective communities, not disenfranchise them, and not play to a rhetoric that is intended to divide us all. You know why this is here. I know why this is here. And I'm perfectly aware of the political reality of my vote today. I know it will happen when I leave the chamber. I know it will happen when I go home. But the reality is, I simply cannot be complicit to law that is not based on any sort of truth, and it certainly will not serve for justice. Mr. Speaker, I will be unapologetically voting no today on this bill.
The lady in the 57th, Dr. Rowan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am the lead sponsor of this bill. I am a stakeholder. I'm here because of my grandson. He was 1 pound 5 ounces when he was born, and he wanted to live. His eyes were sealed shut, just like a newborn kitten's eyes. You could see through his skin, you could see his blood vessels. And he was a fighter. He wanted to live. He's 15 now, and if I haven't told you yet, he won the Golden Horseshoe. He's a wonderful little boy. Well, he's not a little boy anymore. He's 15. It was because he wanted to live, and he fought to live. There were 13 doctors and medical professionals in his room when he was born. They fought for him, and we prayed for him. And as I said, you know, he was a fighter. I'm here also because I'm his grandmother. And as the chairman of Seniors, Children, and Families, I'm speaking for them. Somebody mentioned something about choices. What choices do our grandparents have, the grandparents involved, when it's their daughter-in-law or their daughter that has requested this abortion? What choices did they have? I'm speaking not just for the infants, I'm speaking for the grandparents. And I know the statistics here in West Virginia. I know we have grandparents, I know we have aunts and uncles raising these children. And what words am I living by? Well, I'm inspired by Proverbs 31, verses 8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves.
The gentleman at 37th, Dr. Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lead sponsor please yield?
Yes, sir.
Lady does
Thank
yield.
you. So you came up with this legislation?
I was part of, I was involved in discussions.
You're
Yes,
involved in discussion. Well, during those discussions, did you talk about what's the current standard of care? Does this change the current standard of care when a baby is born alive in any circumstances?
Well, let me say, I know several doctors as friends, and I look around here in this room, and I have no doubts the doctors we have here will do everything they could to save a baby's life.
Do you have any doubts that any doctors in this state wouldn't apply a reasonable standard of care to any child?
I feel they would.
Do you think they would?
I would hope they would, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for yielding. Briefly, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, gentleman's recognized.
This bill doesn't change the standard of care. When a child is born prematurely, of course, all doctors would apply a reasonable, do everything in their power to save that child. That's not what this bill's about. And I've always voted pro-choice. I've run pro-choice. I don't necessarily think this is an anti-choice bill. I don't think it's a pro-life bill. But I'm going to try to be pro-reality and talk briefly about this bill, because on the way to work today, I heard a radio show where there was a political operative, happened to be a Republican political operative, mischaracterizing this bill, because we all know that that's what's going to happen after this vote takes place, and was claiming that a certain political party is so extreme that they are for killing babies after they are born. Does anybody really believe that anybody in this room is actually for killing anybody? Do you really believe that? Because that's what the ads are going to say. So I think if you look at where this bill came from, ma'am, where this bill came from, sorry, Mr. Speaker, it came from other states, and as soon as it runs, they run these ads that mischaracterize a political party saying that they're for killing children after they're born. That's ridiculous. It is. It's ridiculous, and it's sick to use this as a political tool. Okay, I think that the goal of this bill is to get a few of us to vote against it so you can run these ads. Personally, I don't think it changes the standard of care. So I'm pro-choice. I think I'll still be pro-choice after I don't fall into your trap. So when you're ready to actually protect children in this state, when you're ready to fund birth to 3 programs, we'll be waiting patiently over here, okay? When you're ready to extend Medicaid 1 year postpartum, we'll be patiently waiting over here. When you're ready to fix our broken foster care system for the 7,000 children that are stuck in our foster care system right now, we'll be patiently waiting over here. So let's end the games before the filing deadline's over. But it's ridiculous. Nobody in here has a bad intention, would ever harm another human being like that. Nobody in here is evil.
The gentleman 22nd, Dr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and be brief. I keep hearing, why is this bill here? And as much as I wanted to sit here and be quiet, this bill's here because it is happening. Do a Google search. Get on YouTube. See if they're at an abortion that the baby's crawling around after they pull it out of the mother. That's why that bill's here. Y'all want to talk about stakeholders? I'm all right. I'd love to talk to the stakeholders. 2017, over 14 stakeholders were killed by by abortions in West Virginia alone. So not all the stakeholders can be here. So I'll tell you now, I'm happy to support it, and I'm glad it's out here, and I'm ready to do it. Thank you.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman 24th, Douglas Rodriguero.
Yes, sir. I'd like to speak to the bill.
Gentleman's recognized.
I think you guys have been in leadership for the last 6 years. It's hard for me to imagine that this is the best pro-life bill you can come up with. I'm going to support the bill, but I think even me and the Speaker introduced a bill last year that would nip all this, and it fails to come out of the committee every year. Y'all have the power in the House, you have the power in the Senate and the governor, and yet have I seen one decent pro-life bill come out since y'all's been in control. I'm begging to save the babies, yet I have seen nothing come out on behalf of the babies. I will be supporting the bill because it's painted as a pro-life bill, so I have to support it. Thank you.
Lady in 30 seconds, Eric Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really had hoped that I wouldn't have to speak today, but over the course of today's debate and arguments, there have been several people who have automatically made assumptions about the motives of people in this body and why we support pieces of legislation like this, why we support this particular piece of legislation, that it's political game or something of that nature. But I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't a political game to people like Melissa Oden and Gianna Jessen and Josiah Presley and more than 270 other documented cases of individuals who have been born alive during an abortion procedure. This is about providing life-sustaining measures for a baby that is born as a result of abortion. Nothing more than what would be done for a baby who was done prematurely at the same gestational age. For example, if a baby, I'll be a little personal. My brother Jason was born 12 weeks prematurely. He was so small, we could hold him in our hands. We could see his chest literally cave in as he would try to breathe. The doctor gave the sufficient life-sustaining measures to make sure that he would not only survive, but that he would thrive for the rest of his life. All we are doing is asking that any baby born alive during an abortion procedure at that same time frame would be given the same life-sustaining measures. We talk about stakeholders. Well, it's too bad none of those babies were available for comment. In the end, what we are talking about is infanticide. Let's be honest. We can sit here and we can debate when life begins all day long, and everybody in here might have a different opinion. But I would hope that every single person in this room would agree that when a baby takes his first breath, when his heart is beating outside of the womb, that life is present. For me, this isn't a political game. For me, this is about life. This is about protecting the rights of an individual just like me, just like you. We've brought up that abortions aren't taking place after 20 weeks now. During the course of that debate, we made exceptions. So abortions are still taking place. And it is my firm belief that those babies who are born alive during an abortion procedure in the state of West Virginia deserve those protections. And we can sit here and we can say it doesn't go far enough. My friend from the 24th, I have always appreciated your support. All of our pro-life bills, every single one of them have been bipartisan. And I know this one's going to be. It's going to pass with maybe 6 or 7 no votes. But in the end, what we're doing is we are taking steps forward. We are making it known that we stand with life. And if we can disagree when life begins, that's fine. But I would hope we can all agree that when these babies take their first breath, when their life is beating after this magical trip through the birth canal, that they are life, that there is life that is present. And so the reason we pass this bill is because of what happens in neighboring states. Not too long ago, a few years ago, Kermit Gosnell in our neighboring state of Pennsylvania was fined and found guilty of murdering babies after birth. He literally snipped their spinal cords, left them on a table, and literally put the heads of those babies in the refrigerator where his staff kept their lunch. There are plenty of documentaries about it. You can look at it. And my goal in West Virginia is to make sure that doesn't happen. And so, Mr. Speaker, we can sit here and continue to debate this bill all day long, but in the end, we all know that if it saves one life, it's worth it. And so I am an unapologetic yes vote on this bill, and I would encourage every single one of the members of this body to be the same.
Do any other members wish to speak to the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 5 nays, 2 members absent not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4007.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the acts to the House, to the Senate, request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4022, clarifying the qualifications of the Chancellor of the Higher Education Policy Commission.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Chair hears no objections. Gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill shows that current law provides that the Chancellor of HEPC cannot hold any other administrative position within the higher education system. What the bill does first is to add the proviso that the Chancellor of HEPC may also serve as the Chancellor for the Community Technical College Council. Currently, both positions are open, but both are not filled. The second part is there are 2 other changes. It retitles the Vice Chancellor for Health Sciences to the Senior Director for Health Sciences to reflect the HEPC's current operating structure. And the third part is it removes the Vice Chancellor for state colleges because that position has never been filled. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 1 nay, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4022.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the acts to the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4103, relating to Office of Drug Control Policy.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? Chair hears no objections. Gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Rohrbach, to explain the bill.
Speaker, before us we have House Bill 4103. The purpose of this bill is to elevate the Office of the Drug Control Policy within the organizational structure of the DHHR to under supervision and control of the Secretary. These are the only changes this makes. This is a bill that was asked for by DHHR, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 1 nay, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of members present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4103.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the acts to the House, to the Senate, request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading. If none, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2602, including possession of known stolen property in the offense of receiving or transferring stolen property.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2679, relating to state-issued identification cards.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2696, creating an additional index system for state-owned lands.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2922, relating to requirements to obtain a final order of discharge for dismissal or possession of opiates or opioids.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2924, permitting the West Virginia Tourism Office to decide to contract with the Division of Highways to sell advertising space on the West Virginia 511 website.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 4010, changing the licensing requirements for certain casino employees.
The bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4042, requiring agencies exempt from some or all of state purchasing requirements to adopt procedural rules.
The bill to be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, delegates Espinoza and Williams.
Are there objections to leaves being granted? Chair hears no objections. Leave shall be granted. Remarks, members of the House. Introduction to guests. The lady from the 51st, Douglas Walker.
I have remarks to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Lady may proceed.
Thank you. I've sat in this chamber for the first time last year. I've listened to the good and the bad of many things. We spoke about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in every human being. But yet I stand before you as we've introduced many amendments and many bills that sit in committee and don't see the light of day, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every West Virginian, we want to make sure that every person born is going to be protected. Well, I'm not even protected as a woman because we can't pass a Katherine Johnson Pay Act. We can't even pass an act to protect our neighbors who's part of the LGBTQ community. We want babies as well as I want babies. I am a proud mother of 2 kings. But do you know how many days I went hungry to make sure that my kings were provided for? Where was this body then? Do you know what type of HUD housing I had to live in? And the first day of moving from my gated community, there was a drive-by shooting. Where was this body then? Do you know what I teach my sons? One has 3 strikes and one has 4. Number 1, you're black. Number 2, you're male. Number 3, you're poor. And for my oldest son, you're gay. Don't walk in the store with your hands in your pocket. Don't travel this state alone. Make sure you have a true ally. Even if you're not doing anything and there's a police enforcement officer, a law enforcement, stand down. Survive the encounter in 2020. I have no problem with life, but I do have a problem because I have no pursuit of happiness. West Virginia is my second chance state. No, I'm not born and bred here. But there was no policy, no program to give me the survival skills. But what it was the people, and not the ones that sit in this chamber or the one across the way. It was the people in my neighborhood who struggled just as I did. It was the people who wanted to actually give a hand up and not slap you on your hand when you wasn't a robot to what they wanted you to be. For every bill that's introduced, there's even a problem with natural hair. We have students that can't even play a game. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am a proud black woman serving in this house, even though I'm not even respected when I walk through the doors. I am a proud black woman being a citizen of West Virginia, even though my year-round tan is not even respected among my colleagues in this same house. I am a proud black woman who supports all religions But yet and still, when we get certain people of faith to come say a prayer, we disrespect them by taking a stand, by taking a seat, and I call that disrespect. I am a black woman, and I'm proud of exactly who I am, whom I am, and whose I am. I get attack ads for joining a prayer caucus. I get attack ads for fighting for women's rights. I get attack ads for standing with the LGBTQ community. I get attack ads because I tell you to do your job. There's too many hungry people in this state, and I don't see that we voted on anything for anything. We have a waiting list of people with special needs, and we didn't do anything about anything. We have people that doesn't even have a livable wage, and we're not doing anything for anything. So as you speak about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and as you speak about the Constitution, I remember when there was an amendment that made black people human. I hope we don't have to introduce another one or repeal that so I can remain human. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 35th, Capito.
Announcement, sorry.
The gentleman, the 54th, Doggett Hott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for the courageous words of the gentlelady, delegate from the 57th, to be published in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. The gentleman, the 50th, Doggett Angelucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to have the comments by the delegate from the 51st, Delegate Walker, and also the comments from the gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Hansen, the gentlelady from the 51st, Delegate Fleischauer, and the delegate from the 65th, Delegate Brown, regarding House Bill 4007 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection. Chair hears no objection. Introduction to guests. Introduction to guests. The gentleman, the 16th, Doggett Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In one of our galleries here, we have a former member of this body and sitting Chief Circuit Judge of Cabell County, Judge Greg Howard. Would he please rise and would the House make him feel welcome?
The gentleman, the 58th, Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the gallery across from me, I have a guest down for Tourism Day from Hampshire County. There is Capon Springs in eastern Hampshire County. It's 4,700 scenic mountain views or acres of mountain views, pure spring water that is healing and crisp and bubbles out of the ground in a place called Capon Springs and Farms. And we have down Jonathan Bellingham, who is the owner of Capon Springs and Farms. His family's had it for a long time. If everyone could help me welcome Jonathan to the House of Delegates, I'd appreciate it.
The gentleman with the 22nd, Doggett Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to introduce the doctor of the day, but she had to leave out on a call. But our doctor of the day today is Marianne Maurer from Charleston, West Virginia. If you get a chance and see her in the hallways, welcome her to our Capitol. Thank you.
The lady in the 48th, Doggett Waxman.
Just happened to notice in the North Gallery we have former Delegate Joe Statler in the chamber. I hope everybody will give him a warm welcome.
The gentleman in the 26th, Doggett Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Two friends in the South Gallery, Leslie Baker, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation for Beckley, and Jill Moorfield, who is with the Beckley Renaissance. I had the opportunity to work with both of them at the World Scout Jamboree this summer. Tremendous people. Thank you, ladies, for being here today.
The gentleman in the 22nd, Doggett Jeffries.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Wouldn't you know my timing would be off. Mary Ann Maurer walked in, our doctor of the day. She's back here. We can make her feel welcome here now.
Miscellaneous business. Miscellaneous business. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. on Thursday.
Lady from the 49th moves that subject to announcements. The House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Are there announcements? Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 behind the chamber.
The gentleman from the 10th, I got Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 5 p.m. to take up the budget presentation from the Secretary of State. Also, a reminder of the Republican members of the Finance Committee, there will be a caucus in the Chairman's office at 4:30. Tomorrow, the Committee on Finance will also hold a budget hearing for the Supreme Court. All are welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate, what's the time tomorrow for that meeting?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Thank you. Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, folks. This evening at 5 o'clock, the Judiciary Committee will meet in the committee room, and that agenda will be posted. And then tomorrow morning, the committee will adjourn at will convene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in the committee room. And the agenda for that meeting will be posted. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 13th, Delegate Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 5 p.m. and then again at 9:30 tomorrow morning. The agendas are posted, and also the chairman and I will be caucusing with the Democrats at 4:30 today, and then with the Republicans at 4:45 in the chairman's office.
The gentleman from the 45th, Delegate Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet at 5 p.m. today in the House Government Organization Committee Room, 215 in the East Wing. The agenda is posted.
The gentleman from the 46th, Delegate Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Industry and Labor will meet today in the Judiciary Room, and the Republican members are to caucus 15 minutes before in the Judiciary Chairman's Room.
The gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Mant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two announcements. Your subcommittee on Judiciary concerning House Bill 4002 will meet tomorrow at 3:30 in the Judiciary Chairman's office, which is room 418. The other announcement I'd like to make is the Committee on Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development will be meeting today at 1 o'clock in the Government Organization Room. And everything will be posted. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 58th, Eric Coles.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow, Thursday, the 16th at 1 p.m. in the Judiciary Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
In the Judiciary Committee room. The gentleman from the 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Seniors, Children, and Family Issues will meet today at 3 p.m. in the House Government Organization Room.
The gentleman from the 1st, Dr. Schwartzmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There'll be a labor caucus today following the morning session in the GovOrg room, and lunch will be provided. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 30th, Dr. Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just by an introduction by way of announcements, if I may, I noticed in the South Gallery Gavin Ward, who's there with one of our princesses from Raleigh County, Alexis Boland and Christina Mother, I think, and they're here for the Fairs and Festivals and Tourism Day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We have further announcements. The gentleman from the 29th, Dr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I announced it yesterday, but so many of these get announced, I just want to make sure everybody remembered. The subcommittee on House Bill 4045 will meet in the Judiciary Committee room at 3 p.m. today. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee for the Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse will meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee room.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is a motion that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor will say aye. Any opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor, excuse me, will please vacate the chamber. With those on the floor and our guests in the gallery, please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Rabbi Victor Urecki of the Benai Jacob Synagogue in Charleston, West Virginia. And then please remain standing as we are led in the pledge this morning by the senior senator from the 5th, Rabbi Urecki.
Almighty God, thank you for this opportunity before this session begins for all of us. These are the rare moments in this chamber where we can, if only for a moment, leave what can at times be an arena of anger, a theater of tension, a stadium of shouting, and remind ourselves that in this sacred space we can be one, that we are with colleagues and friends, part of an exceptional country, an extraordinary state, an inspiring city, together united and dedicated to bringing good for others, reminding ourselves for a moment that we are brothers and sisters. We all have different views of the world and visions for our state. We were elected by citizens with varied needs, and we have unique personal narratives that have shaped us, guided us, and challenged us. God, help us remember throughout the day that that's okay. We are grateful to you, God, and we ask before we begin to help remind us through our debates, our committees, our sessions, and our votes, that we can listen to each other, that we can appreciate each other, that we can respect each other, and that we can even enjoy each other's company when the gavel closes this session. God, help us to recognize how blessed we are to be here together in life with the people next to us, and help us cherish the collective responsibilities, the challenges, and the opportunities we all share. And as this day's session begins, let us learn to, despite the tension and the occasional shouting, to somehow find the courage to love one another always. By doing so, we will have made you proud and the people of this state proud as well. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for the prayer. The senior senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. If those in the gallery and those on the floor will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, January 14th, 2020. The
senator from Upshur County requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guests. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest of the senior senator from the 8th, we have Maddox Earl. As guest of the senior senator from the 16th, Helena Radford. As guest of the junior senator from the 9th, Brandon Daniels. And as guest of the junior senator from the 16th, Teresa Rucker. If they would all please rise and the Senate give them a warm welcome. Thank you. You may be seated. Further introductions, the junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it's my pleasure and yours to announce our doc for the day. In the rear of the chamber today, we have with us Dr. Marianne Maurer from Charleston, West Virginia. She's an absolute pillar in our family practice residency. If you wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Thank you for being here. I'll see you after the session. Are there further introductions? The senator from Raleigh County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm delighted to have my son-in-law, Donald Thomas, in the North Gallery. He brought one of our pages here today. He's one of the teachers at our school. Would you please join me in welcoming him?
Further introductions? Further introductions. The junior senator from the 8th, or senior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf and my junior senator from Kanawha's behalf, one of our pages today. Her mother is here, and Kimberly Earl, if she would stand, and I would like the Senate to give her a warm welcome.
Senator from Wetzel County.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're honored and privileged today to have two representatives in the North Gallery from the Southern Leadership Conference. We'd like to make them welcome Colleen Cosino and Roger Moore. Would you please stand and let the Senate make you welcome to West Virginia?
Further introductions, the senior senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator from Jefferson and I are very pleased to have with us a guest, the father of one of our pages, Helena Radford, up in the gallery. We have Bill Radford. If he'd stand, he's one of the parishioners of mine from Camp Hill Wesley United Methodist Church in Harpers Ferry. Give him a warm welcome.
Further introductions. Further introductions. Communications from the House.
There are none.
Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 16, creating Protect Our Right to Unite Act, and reports back committee substitute for same. With the recommendation, committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 42, permitting faith-based electives and classroom drug prevention programs, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Patricia Puertas Rucker, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 225, authorizing municipalities to enact Adopt a Street programs, and reports back a committee substitute for same. With the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report will be received.
That's all I have, sir.
Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 468 through 505 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Junior senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 468 through Senate Bill number 505 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 5 by Senator Rucker requesting Joint Committee on Government and Finance study ways to achieve higher levels of effectiveness and fairness in public school system.
Under Rules, Senate resolution will have one day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 6 by Senators Romano, Facemeyer, Baldwin, Beach, Hardesty, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, and Lindsay, naming the Walter E. Swagger Jr. Memorial Bridge.
Under Rules, Senate resolution will have one day.
Senate Resolution 8 by Senators Romano and Swope, designating January 16, 2020 as Aviation Day.
Under Rules, Senate resolution will have one day. Are there further resolutions?
No, sir.
Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Resolution 7 designating January 15th, 2020 as Tourism Day at the Legislature.
Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption.
Junior senator from 17th requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will please read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 7 designating January 15th, 2020 as Tourism Day at the Legislature.
The question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's prudent to take a moment and give our tourism folks a hearty congratulations for what they've been able to accomplish. In just the past 2 years, with the launch of the new Almost Heaven campaign, there has been a 9.9% growth. The governor outlined many of these accomplishments, but it's important to reiterate to the people of West Virginia what a great job they are doing. That's a step ahead of the national pace by over 58%. Now, what that means to us is $4.6 billion in traveler spending. That's $534 million to state and local tax revenue. The state of West Virginia, we have a problem between perception and reality. We all know that the reality is West Virginia is a wonderful state. We know it because we live here. We choose to call this home. But getting that message out to the rest of the world, especially our surrounding states, can be tough. We know that it takes money to make. The governor and the legislature saw to that. We started building up our parks, started putting more money back into tourism. And as an effect of that, there is a halo effect that's pointed out that makes us not only a more popular tourist destination, but a place that hopefully will encourage those to build a career, start a business, attend college, and most importantly, come here to maybe live and retire. So when I was a kid, I know there was a lot of whitewater rafting and all these things. It was a great focus, and it seems like we've kind of lost that, but it looks like we're getting it back. So these guys are doing a great job of making West Virginia great again, and for that reason, I support the resolution.
Further remarks or further discussion, the senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to stand up real quick to applaud this resolution and applaud this designation. I have to say tourism is extremely valuable to my area of the state, and I'm really grateful to have folks that did the 5-hour drive down here to represent my area of the state as part of Tourism Day. So I just want to thank them for the work that they do, because it is really a great thing and it's helping us to make our state great and let others know about it.
Further discussion, the senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of this resolution. I think it's important that we recognize the critically vital role that tourism plays in the economy of this state. All 34 of us here in this body and our 100 colleagues in the House of Delegates are working hard every day to try to bring economic growth, prosperity, and development to West Virginia, and there's no doubt in my mind that tourism is an essential and critical component of that effort. And so I urge adoption of the resolution.
Further discussion, the senior senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I urge the adoption of this, but I also want to thank one of the people that is here in Jeff Lust that's been with Hatfield McCoy's, and what the impact that has been to southern West Virginia. And I also want to raise a question, as we have been looking at Beach Fork, that they look at the same thing at Cacapon and all the other places that have been, that Beach Fork gets the same view that all the other ones do. No one knows the impact of what tourism has on area, and our area has been lost in that. And when you look at the impact of all the state parks, every one of them lose money. And every one of them are a driver for what happens to tourism. If you didn't have Twin Falls where Hatfield McCoy's is, you wouldn't be able to have some of the other activities that you have. So I say that I support tourism and I want us to look at it, but let's look at every area evenly and in the right fashion so that we all can enjoy in tourism. Thank you.
Senator from Raleigh County.
President, I'm delighted to be able to recognize the Department of Tourism and all of the hard work that you do. We're very thankful for what you do. We had some issues and some concerns trying to get some things going in southern part of the state where we have so many difficulties going on, and they were willing to partner with us and be a part of that. And I'm very thankful for the work that you do, and we're honored to be able to give you this recognition today. I urge passage.
Senator from Wyoming County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this resolution, and I just want to thank everyone that's involved in the tourism industry and how important it is and how critical it is for our state, all over our state, especially southern West Virginia, and how much money that it's contributing to our economy and helping the growth of our communities. And I just want to salute you all and say thank you so much.
Senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the resolution also. Being from Tucker County, I better be in support of tourism. As most of you know, I'll tell people I represent 8 counties, and I start naming them off, and most a lot of people don't know, but as soon as I say Tucker County, they, I know where that's at. Blackwater Falls, Canaan Valley, the Purple Fiddle, Timberline, and I appreciate especially what Kelsey's did since she has taken over. Been really aggressive, and it's huge for my area, Tucker County, because that's all we have to rely on basically in Tucker County. The state and federal government owns most of our land, and without tourism, we probably wouldn't exist. So I do appreciate that, and I support this resolution. And since I just want to note that tourism has really increased in the Tucker County area since I moved up there. So I'd like to think that people are coming to see me too. So, but with that being said, we do appreciate everything that the governor and the staff has been doing, and the legislature to support tourism in the state. And for them reasons, I support the resolution.
Further discussion? Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting the resolution.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in brief recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Are there further items on unfinished business?
No, sir.
Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 94, providing persons with physical disabilities ability to vote by electronic absentee ballot. Third reading of the bill.
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 94 is a bill that was recommended to both houses of the legislature during interims by the Joint Judiciary Committee. Its purpose is to, in a one-sentence description, is to bring West Virginia into compliance for purposes of absentee voting with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's the fundamental purpose of the bill. The bill itself, the committee substitute, amends 6 sections of the state code. They're all in Chapter 3, Article 3. They are sections 1, 2, 2B, 4, 5, and 6. And then the bill adds a new section to the code. It's designated as Section 1A. The drafting of the bill, Mr. President, is a collaborative effort. The Secretary of State's office was involved with it, advocates groups, along with staff of House and Senate Judiciary committees. We are arguably out of compliance right now with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this bill will endeavor to bring us into compliance. It redefines disability. We have a definition of disability in our current law in the voting, absentee voting statutes, but it's much narrower than the definition of disability that applies under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Our language right now refers only to blindness and permanent and total physical disabilities. The definition that comes from the ADA is, quote, a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, close quote. So that definition is pulled from the federal law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and utilized in the bill. The bill defines physical disability. The current definition of disability, the definition in our current law is blindness, disabilities in both hands, and our law also refers to permanent, total and permanent disabilities. This bill before us explicitly states that voters with disabilities who are confined to a location and unable to vote in person may vote mail-in absentee ballot. And the bill also permits voters with physical disabilities to vote by electronic absentee ballot. So, and in that sense, it is similar to what we've done in the law in West Virginia under Section 5 of that article, permitting uniformed and overseas voters, citizen voters. The acronym is UOCAVA, UOCAVA, voters, to vote electronic absentee ballots. And the Secretary of State has implemented that last year. The bill adopts the, well, I said that, the definition of disability contained within the Americans with Disabilities Act. And for purposes of compliance with that act, here's how it works. We require an application. The bill will require an application for placement on, there's a special absentee voter list, and that's maintained by the Secretary of State for persons voting absentee due to a disability if they intend to vote by mail-in absentee ballot or now by electronic absentee ballot. And the special absentee voting list is maintained by the Secretary of State, but the Secretary of State provides it to the county clerks so they know who the names of the persons, and this will now include people with physical disabilities who are permitted to vote absentee ballots on a continuing basis without having every election cycle to reapply.
So, Mr. President, I'll be happy to try to answer questions. There was some urgency with this because, as members of this body know, we are now, it opened on Monday, I guess, a filing period for an election cycle. And one of the things that we committed during the interim process to do was to try to get this bill across the finish line before, in sufficient time before that date in February when all this absentee voting process starts under our election code. So everybody who is eligible to take advantage of this is able to do so during the elections that are held this year. I urge the passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? The senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the chairman yield, please?
Senator yields. Senator does yield.
Sir.
I've looked in here, and again, with disability, does the voter just have to say that they have a disability, or do they have to have a physician attestation that they have a disability?
Check with counsel before I answer that.
Where I'm looking at is line 17.
In which section?
On page 6, I believe. And it,
yeah, so in that section, and that's subdivision 3, sub A, the bill requires, and some of this is current law, a statement that the voter has a physical disability and would be unable to vote in person at the polls in any election, a description of the nature of the disability, and a statement signed by a physician to that effect. So that actually is current law, but it's preserved in this bill that you have to have a doctor.
Okay. So that, again, they can't just say, look, I've got a disability. They're going to have to, this disabled person is going to have to somehow either come to the doctor's office or make contact with the doctor's office to get something signed.
It says that the requirement is a statement signed by a physician, so whether or not a person had to go to a physician's office to get that, I don't know. That might, perhaps for somebody moving into the state with a physical disability, it might be necessary. For somebody who already lives here and has a physician who knows and treats that person, the physician may be able to provide it without requiring an office visit, depending on, the relationship between the patient and his or her physician.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage. On question unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none on this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Are there further bills on third reading?
No, sir.
Bills on second reading?
There are none.
Bills on first reading?
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 35, limiting civil penalty for littering conviction to $2,000. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 46, defining pepper spray and exempting from definition of deadly weapons. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced.
Senate Bill 140, changing rate at which certain judges are paid for mileage when traveling within state. First reading of the bill.
Bill be advanced.
Senate Bill 170, alleviating double taxation on foreign income at state level. First reading of the bill.
Bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 207, creating Prosecuting Attorneys Detectives Act. First reading of the bill.
bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 310, updating certain terms used in West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act. First reading of the bill.
Bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading?
No, sir.
Introduction of guest. Remarks by members of the Senate. The Senator from Brooke County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll give you a break for a second. I wanted to talk about something that was in the paper this past weekend, and I think a lot of people probably read the article. It was an article that was talking about the State Board of Education proposing a policy to reduce the social studies requirements here in the state of West Virginia. Currently, the requirements for social studies, history, things of that nature, is that there's 1 credit for world history, a credit for U.S. studies or AP U.S. history, another additional credit for social studies, and then the 4th credit for civics or AP U.S. government and politics. And so with 22 credits required for graduation, that's 18 that are prescribed by the board and 4 are personalized, and then there are 6 credits if the students are on a 7-period schedule or 10 credits if they're on a block schedule. So students have a lot of flexibility as it stands. What's being proposed is, and what's talked about in this article is a reduction in the social studies requirements that will go down from 4 to 3. And typically, you have your freshman year of high school, you've got your U.S. history, or your world history, your sophomore year, you've got U.S. History 1. Usually that takes you up to Reconstruction. And then your junior year, you've got from Reconstruction on. But what this would do would just make U.S. history just 1 credit, just 1 class. And so there would be a shrinking down of what students are learning about history, what they're potentially learning about our government, civics, and how everything operates. And I think that's something we should all be concerned about. The state, Mr. President, has a pretty good track record on these things. We've got the Golden Horseshoe, we've got the State History Bowl, we've got the Social Studies Fair that really engages students in learning about not just the history of West Virginia, but how our government works, American history. And I know I'm a history nerd. It's what I studied in college. It was my best subject in high school. And so maybe I'm making more out of this than what it really is, but I think I have a real concern here of what the board is proposing. And I know the board, I know they're trying to do the right thing. I know that they're setting out to try to put in place the right policy. Talking with our state superintendent in one of our committee meetings during interims, he mentioned that he was a former social studies teacher. And I know that our board president is a certified social studies teacher. I know that our state board vice president is a certified social studies teacher. I know that our assistant state superintendent for teaching and learning is a certified social studies teacher. So I'm a little confused at what they're trying to get at here, especially because this was tried back in 2017, Mr. President. And a policy very similar to this, and a reduction. And it was never enacted. And there were a lot of public comments at the time when this was contemplated back then. And when the state board decided not to do it, their response was the social studies requirement will remain at 4 credits to ensure students are prepared to participate in a global society. I'm not really sure what has changed since then. What fundamental change has occurred in our education system that would necessitate revisiting this policy? And I don't see it. I think that nothing has changed. And I think, if anything, current events in the world have shown us the importance for history and learning history and social studies. I think of the number of people that I've spoken with that have asked me about the impeachment process on the presidential level, that have asked about the impeachment process on the state level with the Supreme Court justices. And I can still see it in my history book in high school. The definition of impeachment was to bring official proceedings against, or official charges against a public official. I can see it. But a lot of people thought, well, someone's impeached, so the president's going to be removed from the office, or the Supreme Court justices, they're now out of office. But that's not the case. And so I think it's important to keep people engaged in the process, keep people engaged in history, because the history that we have here in West Virginia, the statue of President Lincoln in the front of this building, what does it stand for? What does it mean? How many students know that? How many are learning it? The senator from Oregon talked about Frederick County, Virginia, the other day in his resolution. And what does that mean to the state? What's the history there? How many people knew about that? There currently is a one-course path that is offered in our schools, but it's my understanding that the majority of counties have a two-course path on U.S. history. And if we were to shrink down to the one-course path, looking at some of the things that aren't required in the one-course path, according to this article, assess why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and the consequences. I cannot imagine kids in school not learning about why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and the consequences. Well, the consequences was us entering into World War II. The one-course path doesn't mention the Vietnam War, an entire war that people who are older in here lived through. People that are my age, generation of our fathers, went off to be a part of. And that's not part of the one. So students would never have the opportunity to learn about that subject. So I would encourage everybody. The public comment period, Mr. President, on this is open until the 24th of this month. And people can get online and they can make a comment. Because I think that's what changed the minds of the State Board back in 2017 or 2018 when they proposed this the first time. And so I would encourage everybody to get out and make public comment on this, because I think it's extremely important in our schools. And I have no doubt that our board president and vice president, because they're certified social studies teachers, I know that they know the importance. And so I want them to realize that everybody around the state does as well. So I appreciate everybody's time. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further remarks? The senator from Raleigh County.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my privilege to bring a bright spot to my colleagues today. One of our pages is from the school that I'm administrator of, Braden Daniels. Braden, as a senior, had distinguished himself a couple of years ago by on his ACT scoring 33. Now he has the composite of 36, the highest score that you can get on the ACT. He's gone through our school from K4 to 12th grade. And so he's been taught most of his years, you're not going to like this, by uncertified teachers and in an accredited school. Now, of course, we've become dignified in the recent years, and so we'll finish our accreditation probably this spring and such, and they're certified now. But most of his years were not under those. We are, you see, sometimes we put like college graduation degrees. Not everybody is equal. High school diplomas, not everybody is equal. But I submit to you, when you look at the state of West Virginia, actually the average ACT score across the nation is 21.0. The average, this is according to WVEA website, the average West Virginia ACT is 20.6. Braden scored to 36, perfect 36. Last year, 11,200 took the ACT test in West Virginia. In the mix of that, sometimes we have people that will tout that our state rating along with the national rating and say that we are doing very well compared to the nation. I want to remind our colleagues that the ACT scores that we get have all of the students in West Virginia that take it, not just the public education students. So when you have a student like this out of a private school that gets a perfect score of 36 composite, then what that does is that averages out with all of the others. And so I'm encouraged that we do have the wherewithal, I'm told, by the Higher Education Policy Council to check out and make a determination, and I would like to see it divided up so that we can see what kind of education really homeschoolers are providing based on ACT scores. What kind of school, what kind of education private schools are providing based on their ACT scores, and then what type of education our public education system is providing based on ACT scores. I think those would be real. Right now, it is everybody. And so every time somebody says, but our ACT scores are fabulous in West Virginia, those are including non-public school students also that may or may not, we'll see, but I suspect they are lifting up the overall scores and making our public education system look better than perhaps maybe it is doing as a reflection of our NAEP scores and such. So when you take all of those into account, we have a 92% graduation rate, we are told. I think that is great. But then higher education comes to our committee meetings and tells us, and you can ask them privately, it's the same thing, where they're saying it takes them 1.5 to 2 years to get them up to college level. There's a problem with that. There's concern there. And so we have about 18,000 total seniors last year. About 6,000 of them don't take the ACT at all. Approximately 1,500, about 8% of those do not graduate. And so where do these people go when they leave our schools? They are getting a diploma and they're going somewhere, but then if you go to Workforce West Virginia, they will tell you that the problem is the largest age group in West Virginia that is not participating in the workforce is the early entrants, the 16 to 24 age group. That is a problem. That's why we have so many problems in West Virginia. We're not addressing that issue. I hope to be able to see that improved as time goes on, but I want to say congratulations, Braden, on your great accomplishment. There was probably, now I provide free tuition for our staff members' kids, and so they haven't had to pay any tuition all down through these 13 years for his education. So now he's going to have a free ride to a great 4-year law school. And that is because of his accomplishments, and he has worked hard in addition to what he has been taught. But if you figure out about those 13 years, you may be dealing with a $50,000 investment in our school. Others may charge, I'm sure they do more. But about a $50,000 investment if they would have paid tuition throughout those 13 years. Do you think that in the rest of his life that he and his family are going to reap $50,000 worth of benefits in his education that he's gotten? I think it's well worth it, and I commend you, Braden, for your accomplishments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further remarks, the senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to return to the 11th order of business.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The introduction of guests. Senator from Boone County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seated in the rear gallery, we have the Logan, on behalf of the senator from Logan, we have the city clerk of Logan, and that's Amber Miller-Vyers. And we also have Miss Shawnee Island, Hannah Thompson, and Miss West Virginia Freedom Festival Queen Haley Mullins. You know, Logan has 4 different sanctioned festivals in the state of West Virginia, as it is Tourism Day. So if they would stand and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions or remarks? Further introductions? Remarks by members. The junior senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. I just wanted to stand up and just speak about an issue that's very important to me, that's had a lot of momentum here recently, and that's paid leave. A professor in Virginia turned me on to the idea of paid family medical leave long, long ago. And the guy was a conservative. He was from Maryland. And what sold me on it was because he described it, and it is a pragmatic solution to what reality is. Sometimes we get so fixated on what's happened in the past that's not necessarily the family structure or society that we have. I mean, I saw a statistic today where 1/3 of West Virginian children are brought up in single-parent homes. There are a lot of 2-parent homes where both parents work. Recently, the Kanawha County Commission voted through, or will likely vote through, paid leave for their employees. On the House side, the majority introduced a bill for paid guaranteed leave of statewide employees. And I too have a bill that's been introduced here in the state Senate that doesn't have anything to do with public employees, but basically creates an employer pay-in program that the state administers for paid leave. And when you think about it, it just makes sense because, again, we live in a world where folks and families are more transient. I'm only 42, but I can remember when I was a child, I could run from hill to hill and bump into someone I knew. That's not the case anymore. And again, going back to single parents who are doing everything they can to play by the rules and do what's right, they don't have time to break away to take care of their children or their elderly loved ones, their parents who were injured or who are sick. It's just a great pragmatic policy that's realistic and faces the issue dead on that we face today. And I hope that this body considers my bill. I hope that the body considers the House bill should it make it through. Thank you.
Further remarks, the senator from Cabell County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm getting ready to call everybody out. I saw on a press release that the last decade is regarded as the lost decade for our state. And I accept that. The lost decade for economic development, jobs, and when you look at it, we basically had 5 years of my party in the majority and 5 years or so of your party in the majority. And I think we get about a D- for economic development. And we don't trust figures. We don't trust figures from the federal government because that's called fake news, you know, the job figures. We all get up and pound our chests and tell the public how great we've done here, and we haven't done great. We're hurting. We're still at the bottom of virtually every economic development statistic. So you can't just, it seems like we go on the radio or TV or in the print media and we just tell everybody we're just doing so well down here, and we're not. And we're going to start hearing speeches about trickle-down economics on some some revenue changes that are being proposed. And that was rejected back when the first George Bush was the president. So let's just try to work together. Stop boasting when there's not much to boast about, and let's get some things done to move our state forward.
Further remarks? Further remarks? Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Everybody knows that I've sort of been in and out, but I just wanted to express my gratitude to the members. I don't think there's a one of you that hasn't wished me well in recovery and whatever. I'm not good at these things for that matter. But it goes further than that. The staff as well. The staff in this building in general has went above and beyond the call of duty to try to be able to help me out. And I can't thank them enough for that. As pertaining to the Finance Committee, I'll be in and out, but I don't want the suggestions, I don't want anything to change. Those that were there last year and the year before knew how we went about doing things, and if you've got thoughts or whatever, reach out, let us know what's going on. The minority leader, former finance chairman up there, has been a tremendous help to me over the years. I have been grateful, will always be grateful for it, and it's something that I felt that needed to be said. We hear that lots of times, just like the senator just got done, that we bark back and forth at each other. But the public should also realize that that's a lot of theater. In reality, what we do behind the scenes is we really take care of each other regardless of whether we like our politics or not. And that is, I've witnessed this from the day I entered into this chamber as a minority member, and I don't think that that's ever going to change on how we behave with ourselves, even though the public doesn't always get to see it. And with that note, you know, I clown around and I joke and all that, but also sometimes I can be a jackass. And there's going to be times that because I'm in a good bit of pain, that I might actually be abrupt or curse or whatever it may be. Please don't think that that's a long-term thing, because it is not. I love every one of you guys in here, and that includes staff. Again, there's nothing better than being associated with such good people. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to every member in here.
Thank you. Further remarks? Further remarks. Junior Senator from the 17th. Miscellaneous business, Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to request unanimous consent that the remarks by the senator from Raleigh be placed in the appendix of the journal, and also the senator from Berkeley County.
Junior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent to the remarks by the senator from Raleigh and the senior senator from the 15th be printed in the appendix of the journal. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Junior Senator from the 17th.
President, pending announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee on the judiciary will meet today at 3:00 p.m. in 208 West Wing.
Further announcements. The junior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet at 3 p.m. this afternoon in the Finance Committee room for budget hearings from the Secretary of State and the Bureau of Senior Services. Also, we will not have a Finance Committee meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Further announcements. Further announcements. The senator from Wood County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Pensions will meet today at 2 p.m. in room 451F.
Further announcements. The senator from Mercer County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Economic Development will meet today at 1 o'clock, 208 West.
Further announcements. Further announcements. If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the Senate adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.